like to thank everybody at better.com for giving me a bottle of champagne. Daddy feels much, much better. Welcome everyone to our keynote luncheon sponsored by US Bank. With us to share an update is Lenny McNeil, the SVP National Managing Director of Strategic Markets and Affordable Lending at US Bank. Lenny is coming up, is a 37-year-old veteran. Not 37 years old. He's 26 years old, but he's been in this business for 37 years. I've had a little bit to drink. Okay, I got to read this resume because it's super impressive, and it's as impressive as he is good-looking. Remember, shallow. Lenny is a 37-year veteran of the finance and mortgage industry. In his current role at US Bank, Lenny serves as the lead executive in development, implementation, and execution of national strategies to increase sustainable home ownership for all communities throughout the country. Lenny has a passion for equality, diversity, and inclusion, and was named one of the top 100 African Americans in corporate America by Black Professionals and Savoy magazines. Please welcome to the stage, you know him, you love him, he's gorgeous, Lenny McNeil. Is that the best intro you've ever gotten?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Wow. I feel like I should sing or something now. Jeez. Well, first and foremost, thanks to everyone that is here today. It is indeed an honor and a pleasure to stand here before you. So on behalf of the executive leadership team at US Bank Home Mortgage, I bid you a good afternoon. And on behalf of the 75,000 employees at US Bank, again, I bid you a good afternoon. And for all of the US Bank employees that are here today, we also say good afternoon. So could I have all the US Bank folks please stand just for a moment? Well, it is indeed an honor and a pleasure to stand here before you, and I was contemplating what I should really say today. You know, I thought about dazzling you with data and giving you a bunch of statistics about what US Bank is doing and some of the things we want to do, but I felt that it was far more important for you to just understand that at US Bank, we're just regular folk. We're the type of individuals you could just talk to about anything because we do care. And it reminded me of a story that took place probably about 2 years ago. And if you'll indulge me, I'd like to share some of that story with you. About 2 years ago, a young man up in the Bay Area, San Francisco to be exact, woke up one morning. He decided that he was going to take a walk to the Golden Gate Bridge. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the Bay Area, you know that if you walk that's about a 2-hour walk. But not to be discouraged, he woke up anyway and he took that walk to the Golden Gate Bridge. And along the way, he had many thoughts, but he just kept moving. He finally reached his destination. He stood there for a moment, went to the edge of the Golden Gate Bridge, and he jumped. He jumped. Now, after that took place, I can tell you that they went back to his apartment and they kind of went through things trying to figure out what could have possibly caused this young man to do such a thing. And as they went through all of his paperwork, they did find a suicide note. They found the note, and the note simply said, "Today is the day. Today is the day that I am in search for hope. I am in search for guidance." And my plan is I'm going to walk from my home all the way to the Golden Gate Bridge. And the intention is that somewhere along the way, I am hoping and praying that I just get one smile. Just one. And the reason that person wanted that one smile is because to him that represented hope. A powerful word, hope. But ironically, as he walked that distance, not one person gave him that smile. Therefore, thinking there was no hope. Now, I share that story with you because all of us in this room represent an opportunity to fulfill hope. Now, maybe you won't encounter someone that's in need of a smile, but you may encounter someone that is in need of education, of opportunity, of belief. You see, more important than numbers, more important than listings, and more important than closings, it's giving individuals that sense of hope. And they are all around us each and every day. And it is our job to give them that smile, to give them that hope. Are you with me on that? Are you with me on that? Well, thank you. Now I'm going to put on my cheaters and I'm going to read this. It is my pleasure to introduce as our keynote speaker for today and this luncheon, JoDee Winterhof. JoDee serves as Senior Vice President for Policy and Political Affairs for the Human Rights Campaign. In this role, she leads the organization's federal, state, and local legislative, field, and legal teams while overseeing management of HRC's political action committees and electoral engagement. This includes the launch of HRC Rising, the largest grassroots expansion effort in the organization's history. Winterhof joined HRC after serving as Chief of Staff in the U.S. Senate and U.S. House of Representatives. In addition to her work on the Hill, Winterhof has held leadership roles on multiple presidential, senatorial, and congressional campaigns, including Hillary Clinton's 2008 presidential campaign. She hails from Walnut, Iowa, and is a graduate of Simpson College. She presently resides in Washington, D.C. with her wife and 2 children. Please, NAGLREP, let's give a warm welcome to JoDee Winterhof.
Thank you, Lenny, for that. I might ask one favor. Is there any chance I could just do handheld? It's not up here, though, is the challenge. That would be awesome. I move around a little. While we're working on that, I'm going to do a couple of plugs. First of all, thanks, Lenny, and the USB team. Not yet. Okay. I went over to the exhibit hall just like for 5 quick minutes, got my bag and did all of that. Thank you. Step over here. Got my bag and did all of that, and I'm putting in a plug for this one item that I found over there that is like a lesbian's dream, and it's this, I don't know if you can see this or not, but Better Homes and Gardens, where are you in the house? Better Homes and Gardens, people. Okay, so over there you have this thing. Let me just show you. This lifts up. This is if you're at like the hardware store and you need a list or you need your measurements. It's got a little notepad. It's got a level. It's got a measuring tape. Look at that. And then it had its own little pen. Okay, so I know some of you were doing your own little 30-second to a minute plugs. That's mine. So I just wanted to share that with you. And that was literally, I just walked in, went to 2 booths, and back out. So I'm going back in there this afternoon to see what I can see. I want to thank a couple of people and recognize a couple of people in the room, and I would be remiss not to start with Jeff Berger. I wouldn't be here up in front of you if it weren't for Jeff's tenacity and persistence. He wanted me to commit to this in the spring. I never commit to doing anything, as you can ask my current wife, like ahead of time. And so he said, no, really, let's just get you signed up to do this. And I said, I'm in. I started thinking, Palm Springs, I can stay here for a few extra days, right? That isn't really how my life works. And so I flew in last night. I fly out tomorrow morning, but I'm honored to be with you, and I'm honored to be with you for the engagement that you have with the Human Rights Campaign, for the work you do in your community, and to be totally honest with you, the work we're going to do into the future. And so I stand before you today grateful to be here with you and have this opportunity. I also want to recognize Andy Linsky, sitting at my table right back here, who's a local realtor. And I have to say, he has served on HRC's board. He currently is on our emeritus board. But more importantly than that, and just so you know, in my heart of hearts, I'm an organizer. Andy today joined NAGLREP after he talked to me and Jeff. So look at that. We even brought an extra person in today. And I want to recognize somebody that I've known personally and has worked at HRC, Christian Hoysrath, who now is with the National Association of Realtors. Christian, where are you? I know you're in the room somewhere. Back, there you go, right back there. Christian worked at HRC. In all truth, he was my assistant for a time, and then, he just went up and up into all sorts of opportunities. He's fantastic, and so that's my plug for the other NAR folks. He deserves probably a raise. I can say this now because he's not working for me. There you go. And then I also want to recognize Dennis and Judy Shepard. Judy Shepard currently serves on the Human Rights Campaign Board, but in all truth, she is someone, and Dennis as well, that I've admired from afar, up close. Their story and truthfully what they have done with their heartbreak and with their anger and their sadness, to turn that into a dialogue with this country to make us a better people and a better country is extraordinary. And I want to add my thanks to them being here as well. So thank you, Dennis and Judy. So out in America, I'm going to talk today about a couple of things, and I'm going to be honest with you up front. We're going to nerd out a little bit. I'm going to share with you some numbers. I'm going to show you kind of where some of these things are with the Equality Act. I'm going to do all of that. I'll share a couple of stories. We will have a little bit of time for questions if it all goes well, but I did want to be honest with you up front. So many of you have already heard a lot about the Equality Act, but I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to talk about kind of the state of things in the country. Now, when I say that, I stand before you as somebody who just arrived from Washington, D.C., and so I know that you know the state of the country from that perspective, so I'm not going to talk a ton about that today unless you want to ask some questions about it. But I am going to dig into the Equality Act. I am going to dig into some of our challenges, and then I'm going to talk to you about how we see the path forward and how we believe we can get to full legal equality in this country. So we have currently a patchwork of protections in the United States of America. If I were to get in a car in Maine and wind my way around the country and arrive out here in Palm Springs for this conference, depending upon what city I was in, what state I was in, what county I was in some cases, my protections could be different. I might have employment protections, but not housing protections. I might have protections if I'm a lesbian, but not if I'm transgender. And so the protections vary. So the state of play in the country right now, I'm going to just show you a few of the maps. I figure you're realtors, you like maps. So here are the landscape in terms of employment protections. And so the darker the state, the 21 states that prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, that's sort of the full Monty, and then it goes down depending upon what other possibilities. Wisconsin is an example where they have full protections, but it's only referencing sexual orientation, currently not gender identity. So you see that that's kind of, and then of course the light gray, that's where we don't have any, except, I put a little asterisk there, we'll talk about cities in a minute. And here are housing protections. So once again, kind of a patchwork across the country, 21 states and D.C. public spaces and protections or public accommodations. Once again, bit of a patchwork. So you see that basically we have, in terms of population, it's just over half the country is protected when you consider the protections that are in place at the state level. And then if you look at, conversion, hold on, I want to go back. Oh no, back for 1 second. When you think about these protections, you know, there are cities like Texas is gray, that's because we're looking at the whole state, but there are protections in many of the cities in a state like Texas. So this is the statewide picture. And then in terms of one of the latest things that's been happening is really a movement to do away with conversion therapy. And this has been happening for a couple of different reasons. One is it's a horrible practice that's not supported by medical science, number one. Number two is it's also been a way in many states and places to have a dialogue about protecting our youth. And so one of the things that I look at as an advocate is how can I find some common ground? How can we have a conversation that isn't about I'm over here and you're over there and we just can't figure out a way to stand on the common ground? One of the ways we are finding to do it is to talk about protecting our youth. And then in terms of cities, this doesn't go into every city obviously, but HRC has a Municipal Equality Index. Many of you probably already know this, but wherever you are in the country, if you're at a city that is one of the top 5 by population cities in a state, if it's a state with the biggest public universities, we don't measure every single city. We measure 500 now, 506 to be exact. And on the right-hand column, you see that those are the cities, the number of total cities that get 100 points on the scale. So it goes from 0 to 100 depending upon the protections. Over time, every 2 or 3 years, the protections are increased or the challenges to cities are sort of increased, and we work in partnership to educate cities or to help them figure out a path that they can be on for protections. So number of cities also protect. So once again, about half the country has protections to date. So the patchwork of protections. So as we think about what we need, one of the things that happened in the movement is that we don't just want to think about employment, and we don't just want to think about housing, and we don't just want to think about public accommodations or protections in public spaces. We want to think about the wholeness of our lives and be able to be protected no matter if it's us going in to sign a contract on an apartment or to get a mortgage or to get a job and keep a job. We want to be protected in our day-to-day lives. And so the idea of the Equality Act came forward a few years ago, about 6-7 years ago. There was one introduced a very long time ago, but it had to be revamped a little bit in terms of some of the common law and some of the things that had advanced. And so as it was reintroduced in the summer of 2015 as a comprehensive civil rights protection. And so here's the deal. It would protect us in employment, credit, housing, education, public places and services, federal funds, and even jury selection. Do you know that you can be discriminated against in many states in the country for jury service? Well, maybe you don't want us to work as hard on that piece. Okay, got it. But wait a minute, did you know? Yeah, there you go. Shouting from the back of the room right as you're trying to get on the Wi-Fi. So those are the areas where protection. Before you started having this dialogue, don't have to raise your hands, just do it with yourself. Did you all know that we didn't have any of these protections? Did you have that clear in your mind that somebody literally could discriminate against you in terms of your housing, fire you, etc., depending upon where you were living in this country? So guess what? The country doesn't know it either. So we have an education job to do in terms of the Equality Act and the need to remove these patchwork of protections, and no matter where you live, no matter where your job transfers you, no matter where you want to travel on a vacation, that you have protections. So the two lead sponsors of the Equality Act, Congressman David Cicilline of Rhode Island and Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon, are the two lead sponsors. In the Senate, also Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin, Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey were integral in this moving forward. And in the House, there were a number of folks who helped, including Speaker Pelosi, Congressman John Lewis of Georgia, whom I heard mentioned earlier from the stage, and also Republican Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania. And so those folks were really the folks to help move this and get it up on its skates. And then in terms of how many co-sponsors, just like you think about legislation, obviously this is how we've been thinking about the Equality Act. 241 co-sponsors in the House before they had the vote, 47 co-sponsors currently in the Senate. In the Senate, it is all the Democrats except for Senator Manchin, and it includes Senator Collins of Maine. And in the House, this number actually included one person who did not win re-election, and so it includes one Republican. And then the other thing to know is it really has a breadth of support in the community. There were a number of folks who really helped with the drafting process and supporting the bill. It's quite extensive across the LGBTQ movement. And then, of course, the other piece that's of note is there are currently over 250 businesses supporting the Equality Act. And it's so many that it takes a couple of slides. There you go. And I'm sure there's somebody that we don't have on there because it's a lot to get on here. This is not every single company. And then there are 543 organizations when we look at both national, state, and local organizations supporting it. That goes well beyond the LGBTQ movement. The bill is supported by the NAACP, by LULAC. It's supported by AAUW, the National Women's Law Center. Lots of organizations support it. And then a number of associations also endorse the Equality Act. And this is one place where I want to particularly call out all of you in the room for your efforts. So the National Association of Realtors endorsed in great part because of your efforts in weighing in partnership with them to bring that forward as one of the associations endorsing the Equality Act. So thank you so much for those efforts. I would also note that in terms of associations, it's the first time we ever had the Chamber of Commerce support, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, National Association of Manufacturers, the Business Roundtable. So in terms of really having a breadth of support across those entities representing millions of workers across this country, we were thrilled to be able to sort of see a new day, if you will, in terms of support for the Equality Act. And so the vote happened in May of this year in the House of Representatives. And the bill was one of the top 10 bills that the new Congress, led by Speaker Pelosi, brought forward, H.R. 5. And you only get one of the top 10 numbers on a bill if you're one of the top priorities. So the good news was, not only was it a bill that the caucus wanted to support, they wanted to make the bill a priority. All of these things I'm telling you are historic. Nothing like this has ever happened in terms of the community being able to see something through to this degree with this level of support. And so the day of the vote, 228 Democrats, 8 Republicans voted for it, 236 to 173. No votes. Sometimes that means they don't show up. Sometimes that means they're ill. Sometimes that means they're back in their district for some reason. I don't think you can make much of that number, but that's the number of folks that voted on the bill. And so it has passed one chamber of the United States Congress, which is extraordinary and has never happened before. So where do we go now? Well, where we go now, for many reasons perhaps, is to the ballot box. And what I want to share with you today is that we've been trying to be innovative at HRC, and not only, as Lenny said in the introduction, put more effort into some of the field efforts across the country, but we truthfully did that for a couple of reasons. One was we made a pivot, if you will, when Donald Trump was elected. And truthfully and honestly to you, contrary to what some people thought, that maybe he wouldn't be so bad for the LGBTQ community, that is not how this has played out. From his selection of Mike Pence as his vice president, and many things this administration has done to roll back protections that we had received, both through executive order as well as regulations across the agencies in the administration. And so as we look at sort of what was ahead, we knew a couple of things. One, we did have to invest a great deal of resource into putting people out in states to organize from the outside in, if you will, if people ever use those terms with you. Not just be in DC going up to the Hill to lobby, not just trying to get meetings with different people in the administration. Outside in, bringing our people from the grassroots to talk to members of Congress, writing, showing up at town halls, et cetera. We knew we were going to have to do that in addition to leaning in around the elections. So as we looked ahead, there were a couple things we wanted to think about. One, what was the state of play in terms of support across the country? So on the left, hopefully you all can see this. I know it's a little bit tiny, but I'll talk about it. On the left, what you have here is these are the folks from 1996 to 2018 over time who've supported marriage equality. So if you look back at 1996, which some of us were around doing this work then, others in the room not so much, that's okay. 27%, 68% with opposition at that time. And you can see over time and right around 2011, the numbers started to switch. And so if you look at that, this is literally just over 20 years. And so when folks say to you, I can't believe how quickly this has all changed, you know, you can see it right here in this polling, right? So this is over time. So today, it's about 2/3 of the country supports marriage equality, and right around 30% oppose, and the other folks, unclear, right? But if you then look on the right-hand side, support for non-discrimination laws, or in truth, supporting our legal equality, right? Those numbers are stronger even than the marriage numbers, 70% of the country. And what we see consistently, no matter where we poll, in a congressional district, a state, nationally, is the numbers for our full legal equality versus marriage equality are always stronger. Usually it's 5 to 7% stronger, depending upon where we're polling, but it's consistently stronger. So what that tells a person like me is that both of these numbers together and thinking about the ground has shifted, and that we are in a place where the country has shifted, and they are more for us than against us. So what you then have to try to do is think about, well, how are we going to use that in a campaign, right? Well, one thing that I will tell you is candidates this last cycle, they talked about our issues publicly as part of their platform, on their websites, on their social media, much more consistently than any election cycle I've seen in my lifetime. And the number of races that were those marginal races across the country, many of those House races that people thought were going to be close, around 50 to 60 races, every single one of those races that was considered marginal used LGBTQ equality as something to attract people to support them. So we went from being a wedge issue 10 years ago, 15 years ago, remember the polls here, to being an issue that people are running on. So that changed. But the other thing that we also know about these numbers is you have to figure out, well, who makes up these numbers, okay? So as we thought about what we should do with this, when I came to HRC, we started to look at our data and said, you know what, we have to put this to better use. And we know a lot about the folks who are on our lists and on our files. We can know a lot more about some of the voters in this country. We need to put this together and make an equality vote model, equality support model. And so we now have this at HRC that we use in all of the elections we work in. And so we know all the way across the country and down to municipal election, et cetera, if somebody, how pro-equality or anti-equality they might be. And so we've started to use this. This will be the third election cycle. We're using it. If you think about off-year elections, if we have any Virginia people in the House, we're using it right now in the Virginia legislative elections. But there are 57 million equality voters nationwide. And so when you start talking about numbers like this, because so many of you are data people, so this is the nerd out part a little bit, you start talking about numbers like this, they're both huge nationally, but we and our supporters and our allies are everywhere. So Doug Jones' Senate election in Alabama, we talked to equality voters because Judge Roy Moore was one of the most anti-equality people in the country. We didn't talk about him being a Republican, so what, right? Lots of people are Republicans. We talked about him being anti-equality. And guess what? For a target group of people, that was plenty for them to get out to vote and vote against him. And so we can use this anywhere in the country. So as it says, we took decades of HRC data, we merged it with some of the commercial data we had access to, decades of polling, and then basic voter information that we had. And so we basically look at how pro-equality somebody is and what's their propensity to vote. And we build a program based upon those two main characteristics wherever we are in the country. It happens that this group of folks skews more female, 60% women, 40% people of color, and a third millennial. So we take that information too. What kinds of messages are working with folks? And then what we do is we look at, like down in Fulton and DeKalb, this is Georgia, in, the total number of voters, equality voters make up 400, well, actually what this is how many equality voters turned out. And so the turnout, if you look at the turnout under all voters was 63%, the turnout under equality voters was 66%. So our communications was to those equality voters as well as our members and supporters. And so our goal is to bump those numbers up and make them higher than the average, higher than what that same group of people have done in previous elections. So in the 2018 elections, we deployed 150 staff. We had 2,200 voter contact events, 5,500 volunteers completed almost 10,000 shifts. You can see the registration numbers, doors knocked. And then in terms of just, and we also use our digital platforms extensively. And so the 37 million digital ad impressions targeting 5.1 million voters, that's targeting equality voters, okay? So we'll try to find where they are with digital. So even if they're rural, we will still try to find them. We might not be able to knock on their door, but we will try to find them in whatever method we can. And so just in terms of stepping away from equality voters, not to confuse all of us, and just looking at the LGBTQ voting block, which is a voting block that is increasing in size and increasing in participation, both good news in terms of the work we're going to do into the future. And so as you look at the exit polls from 2016, which was a presidential election year, and normally when you do the kind of work I do, you only compare a presidential year to a presidential year. It's sort of unprecedented to put the two up against each other. But when you do that, and you look at exit polls from 2016 and 2018, those who identified as LGBTQ, which means either over the phone or in person, you actually told a stranger that you were LGBTQ. So we assume that this is the floor, not the ceiling. Bear with me. And so we're the only demographic group that actually increased participation from 2016 to 2018. Part of what I would tell you is what I've seen in our polls is our community knows the gig is up. We had Trump's number before, we still have it, and we're also paying attention to who is pro-equality and who is anti-equality. And we are making our voting decisions in part based upon that, not necessarily totally even as a community, but in great part we're making our decisions based on that. So when we look at where the equality voters, the last slide I showed you was 5% to 6%, 2016 to 2018 for LGBTQ voters. Now let's take a look at equality voters. So part of the reason that we want to quantify those numbers of 2/3 supporting marriage, 70% plus supporting our full legal equality is we want to be able to have a dialogue with a set of people, and we want to be able to impact elections. So when you go from being 5 to 6% of the voting bloc to 29%, guess what? You impact a much larger piece of that pie. And so this is how we're thinking about elections as we move into the future. So I don't know that I'm very good at putting this in real estate terms, but I'll try, and then you can give me the thumbs up or the thumbs down. We're trying to get a bigger market. We want to have more people we can talk to. We certainly want to be able to talk to our community, but I don't know about you. Do you know, like on your list, like is there a rainbow flag beside every LGBTQ person? No. Now, some of you in Palm Springs probably have about that, but but in most communities you don't. Neither do you on the voter file. And I come from a really small town in Iowa, and I'll guarantee you that if you're gay in my small town, you don't want everybody to know, even in 2019. And so part of what this is a proxy for who's part of the community and who our allies are, okay? Now, I've gone deep into the nerding out. I see many of your eyes still looking at me, so I'm grateful for you. But here's the other thing that we learned. And this is one of the things that I think you can take back to your communities, because obviously I got the memo. You know, I grew up in a small conservative place. I actually was born in Steve King's congressional district, so you know I know that part of the world very well. And what I would say to you is a couple of things. You don't ever really want to be the quote-unquote politician in the room or the preacher. And in my family, I was the politician, and then I had an uncle who was a preacher, and so we had everything covered at family dinners, except we had the entire political spectrum at the table, and so it was a little rough some days. More of them landed on an opposite political persuasion or idea than me. But I think one of the things we have to think about as we move forward in our elections, people don't live their lives going, today I'm totally worried about health care, and tomorrow I'm totally worried about retirement. Like, we have a blend of things. We have a way we think about things, and how I like to think about this is that we learned this in marriage, in the marriage fight, that when we were talking about having rights, that was language that just didn't work. That was a concept that didn't really work with our broader community we were trying to reach. When we shifted the conversation to love, and we said, we want to be able to love who we love. We want to just be able to live our lives. We want to be able to visit our partners and our spouses in the hospital. We want to be able to have retirement benefits to come back and forth if one of us leaves this earth. We just want to live our lives. We want to have love. Love is love. How many of you remember that? Right? When we made that shift, we gained about 8 to 10 points in those polls that you saw up there. It was a value statement. One of the things I think we have to think long and hard about as we approach our electoral work, as we approach our issue education work, etc., we have to make it a little more values-based. Not totally. You still want some facts to back it all up, some stories to back it up. But this messaging up here is more of a message of equality and unity. And I think that is one of the things that is going to help win this next election. I also think it's one of the things that is going to help heal the country in ways that we know big and small and help us move forward. So for equality voters in those House districts that I was telling you about, was the top issue their support, whoops, I kicked the light, sorry. Support for expanding and lowering cost of health care, very strong, wasn't the top issue. Was it support for gun violence prevention and common sense gun laws? Important, not the top issue. Support for protecting Social Security and Medicare? Important, not the top issue. Support for abortion and women's issues? Important, not the top issue. You can keep going on down. Even economic opportunity for working people in the middle class, 24%. These are a little off, sorry, I think I had it done differently. Opposition to Donald Trump? Nope. It was a unity message, a message of, you know what, they're kind of coming after me, they're coming after women, they're coming after immigrants, they're coming after LGBTQ people, they're coming after people of color. We need to stand together and fight back. We need to have each other's backs. So, I will tell you that most pollsters, most campaigns are not yet in this place. And I'm usually not one who tries to be prophetic. If we do not get more in this place, we likely will not win this next election against somebody who has a different vision for this country. Somebody, from my perspective, HRC's perspective, is anti-equality. And so we need to get more into this space. Always want you to think about resources, and so I assume that Jeff and others would be willing to share this with you. But I want to tell you a couple of things just as I close out. One is, you know, I know that many of you have lobbied, told your stories in community, worked with this group and others to bring forward. It is more important than ever to keep telling your stories. Obviously, as somebody who works on LGBTQ equality, I would like many of those stories to be in this space. They're powerful. They have impact, so keep doing that, and we look forward to continuing to partner with you in that. And the other thing I would just say is just, as you think about how you're going to spend your time for the next year, year and a half, you obviously are already involved in this group and others in your communities. I would just encourage all of you, the degree to which you're able to do, whether it's the LGBTQ Community Center, whether it's the folks who are doing direct services to our community and your communities, whether it's national volunteering that you might do, whatever it is, if it's giving more, whatever it is, and this is not a pitch for HRC, this is a pitch for all the LGBTQ groups and frankly beyond. Please, please, please do more in this next time. It is a very difficult time for many of the groups. The calls that we're receiving from members and folks who are needing support in the community are off the charts. And I don't think it's any accident. So as we think about the things we can do together, whether it's supporting the Equality Act, working in our communities together, we look forward to continuing to do that with you. We are so grateful for all you've done. I'm so grateful for Jeff's leadership, and we look forward to the next chapter. So thank you so much. And Jeff, would you be willing to come up here for a minute? Jeff? So, I know I'm the one speaking, but HRC sometimes has some pretty good chum, and so I brought a little something for Jeff, and it just so happened to fit in with my remarks. So here's a shirt that I just got this weekend at HRC's event. There you go. All right. You are so welcome.